Hello, and welcome to My Week in Baseball. I'm your host, Phil Estruth Harrison. You're listening to episode number 15. Recent episodes are published in podcast format on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio, while all episodes are available in a video version on YouTube, so you have many ways to enjoy the show. As always, thanks to Brune Joe Productions out of Nashville for the intro music created especially for this show. Learn more at brunjo.com. Today, we'll talk about a rookie with a great baseball name and what exactly is a rookie anyhow, how newly inducted member of the Hall of Fame David Ortiz ended up in Boston, and I geek out over a great source of super stats. Of course, we'll also have a timely limerick, an amazing blast from the past from the 1986 World Series, and the cap of the day. So let's get right to it. Okay, today's cap of the day is actually a promotional cap for the Seattle Mariners, and it's going to be around the era of 2011, 2012, somewhere in there. It is a kind of fisherman style floppy cap, which I've got to say, I don't think looks good on anybody, especially me, but it is kind of a clever hat. So it's reversible. And it's sponsored by Trader Joe's. So on the front, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it is a dark navy blue with the kind of pale tealish green color that Seattle frequently uses, with the traditional white Seattle S in the center of the cap, with the kind of Mariners navigator symbol, the kind of compass symbol that has the kind of baseball around the points of the compass. So the logo is the traditional Seattle logo on this side. But if you reverse it, and I'm going to do that right now, so if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see this. If you reverse it, the other side is green, and it has a little motif of fish, a pattern of like maybe salmon or something swimming across the pattern of the fabric. And in the middle on this side, it has a round logo that says Seattle Mariners, and in the center of that round logo again is that Mariner star with the baseball in the middle. And actually on the back of this side, on the reverse side, you'll see, I'm going to try to hold this up so you can see it correctly, but it says Trader Joe's. So this was a promotional item from the 2011-2012 era. I'm actually reverse it back to the other side because I personally prefer the navy blue side. So that is our cap for the day. Thank you, Trader Joe's, and thank you, Seattle Mariners. Next up, a great baseball name. Rookie Skye Bolt of the Oakland A's. I love that name. He's 28 years old, from North Carolina. He was hitting .395 at AAA for the Las Vegas Aviators of the Pacific Coast League when the Athletics called him up this year. He's fast. He has a sprint speed rated at 67 percentile, which means he's faster than 2/3 of the other major leaguers. And he has an outs above average defensively at +3 for his career, which should mean he's at least a little bit above average as a defender. Now, he has played parts of 3 seasons, but he is technically still a rookie, and just barely as of this broadcast. Bolt currently has 123 major league at-bats through July 26, 2022. And as we'll discuss in a moment, that is just keeping his rookie status. Skye Bolt, besides his unique name, also has an interesting history of how he currently ended up with the Oakland A's. He was originally drafted in 2012 in the 26th round by the Washington Nationals, but he chose not to sign. 3 years later, the A's drafted him in the 4th round and did sign him. But just 1 year ago, in April 2021, he was selected off waivers from the A's by their Cross Bay rivals, the San Francisco Giants. Interestingly, 1 month later, in May, he was purchased back by the Oakland A's from the Giants. So let's take a look at where he is statistically. So Skye Bolt, as I mentioned, has played parts of 3 seasons. He played in just 5 games back in 2019 for the A's. And then in 2021, last year, he actually played 2 games for the San Francisco Giants before they sold him back to the A's. And they ended up last year playing 32 games for the A's. Not very impressive in 56 at bats. He only batted .089. But this year, doing a little better, hitting .214 in, again, 21 games, about roughly 60 at bats. In 3 years, he has a total of 123 plate appearances. So I think he's wanted more for his speed and perhaps his defense. If we look back in the minors, Skye Bolt did have quite a successful minor league season back in 2018 when he played part of the year at AA and part of the year at the full-length A+ for Oakland in the minors. In that season combined, in 454 at-bats, he hit 19 home runs and stole 19 bases, getting caught only 4 times, batted .260, and at an OPS of .821. So not bad. And as I mentioned, in AAA this year, 2022, he was hitting .395 with a .650 slugging percentage, just 43 at-bats, but he'd already clubbed 2 doubles and 3 home runs. Also walked 6 times compared to 12 strikeouts. So good batting average, good on base percentage, and presumably at least an average defender, perhaps a little bit above average. And I'll talk more about him later when I get into the really geeky stats for today's broadcast. So as we're talking about a rookie and thinking that Bolt barely qualifies, what actually is a rookie? You probably think you know, it's somebody who's in their first year of ball. But as we've stated with Skye Bolt, he's actually in his 3rd season, although he certainly hasn't played many games. And that's where this rookie status is defined. So according to the Major League Baseball glossary at MLB.com, you qualify as a rookie as long as you have not exceeded any of these thresholds in a previous season, or really all seasons combined. And that is that you don't have more than 130 at-bats coming into the season, and you don't have more than 50 innings pitched in the majors. Now, there's actually another item that says, or you have 45 total days on an active major league roster during the championship season. It actually says championship season, and I can find no definition of that whatsoever at MLB. I've scoured the internet for that. Perhaps somebody else can find a definition, or maybe I'll be able to get an answer from MLB on that. Maybe that means a year when your team wins the World Series, or maybe when your team is in a championship series. But the term MLB says is 45 total days on an active roster during the championship season. So that is a very odd term, not one that I'm familiar with. Unless it means you won the World Series, I'm not sure why that's even in there. But basically, it's 130 at-bats, or as a pitcher, 50 innings pitched in the majors. And as a rookie, you then qualify for consideration for Rookie of the Year awards. Next up, David Ortiz, Big Papi, is inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I'm sure all of you who are Red Sox fans or David Ortiz fans, as I am, have already read about his induction into the Hall of Fame. We can talk a little bit about his stats, which I will in a moment. I think what we're going to find is that the more interesting story is how he ended up in Boston to begin with. But let's start out by just taking a quick look at some of David Ortiz's stats. So he played 20 seasons, starting with the Minnesota Twins and going on to the Red Sox, most of his time with the Red Sox, 14 years with the Red Sox. His career batting average of .286, career on base of .380, so nearly 100 points higher, which means he walked quite a bit, slugging of .552 for a career OPS of .931, which is 41% above average. An amazing, amazing player. And arguably, his very last season may have been his best, or certainly one of his best. In that last season, at age 40 for the Red Sox, he had 48 doubles, 38 home runs, and 127 RBI. He actually led the league in doubles and RBI. His batting average was .315. This is at age 40. His on base, .401. Slugging, this is almost unbelievable, .620. .620 slugging percentage for an OPS of over 1,000. That was 64% above league average, OPS plus of 164. He was an all-star, a silver slugger at designated hitter, and he finished number 6 in the MVP voting. I suspect he may have won the MVP if he had been a position player. I think DHs tend to get downgraded in MVP voting. Whether or not that's fair, I don't know. And now that the National League also has a designated hitter, we'll see how votes come out in the future for MVPs. Anyhow, an amazing career. A couple of other highlights I'll point out. In 2006, that was his high point for home runs in a single season, where he led the league with 54. He led the league in RBIs 3 times in 2005, 2006, and his final year, 2016. He led the league in walks twice. In 2006, he had 119 walks, struck out 117 times. So he really struck out and walked pretty close to the same number in most seasons. In fact, actually his final season, 80 walks, only 86 strikeouts. So really good strikeout to walk ratio. And he led the league in on-base percentage in 2007 with .445. So nearly half the time he was on base in that amazing season. It's hard to even count up the number of times he was an all-star or won a silver slugger. And his best voting for the MVP was in 2005. That's the year he had 148 RBIs, leading the league, batted .300 that year, and he came in second in the MVP voting. So anyway, you probably already know this. You may not know the exact stats, right? But you know David Ortiz is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, designated hitter of all time. I may have to do a show where I compare him to Edgar Martinez, though, because being a bit of a Mariners fan myself, and also a Red Sox fan, and a baseball fan in general, but Edgar Martinez of the Mariners has got to be one of the all-time great designated hitters. So I may do that. That'll be an idea for a future show. But what we really want to focus on today more is how he ended up on the Red Sox. It was a little bit of a convoluted path. Here's the deal. He was originally drafted by the Seattle Mariners, and he was regarded reasonably well as a prospect, but the Mariners in 1996 found themselves in a pennant race with the Texas Rangers for the National League West, and they had a legitimate shot at the wild card that year if they weren't able to overtake the Rangers. So in August of 96, they actually traded to the Minnesota Twins for third baseman Dave Hollins, and specified they would name a player later that they would give to Minnesota for Hollins. The reason they did this is that their regular third baseman at the time, Russ Davis, was injured. They're in a pennant race. It makes sense. And as we look at it, Hollins had really a terrific season for them down the stretch. So let me just tell you a little bit about that. So we're going to look up Dave Hollins and talk about what he did for the Mariners that fall. So Dave Hollins played primarily third base and a little bit of first base. He played for 12 years with the Phillies, the Twins, Seattle, and the Angels. And finally, the very last part of his career, he bounced around a little, Toronto, Cleveland, and back to Philadelphia. But the season we're going to focus on here is 1996, and that half of a season that he had with the Mariners, really less than half a season. So he ended up playing just 28 games for the Mariners. But in those 94 at-bats for them, he had 3 doubles, 3 triples, 25 RBI in just 28 games. He walked 13 times, only struck out 15, and he batted .351 with a .438 on base percentage and an OPS of .916. He was terrific for them, at least offensively. And the Mariners did very well that season, but they didn't quite catch the Texas Rangers, who beat them by about 4.5 games for the American League West title. And the Mariners did just miss out to the Baltimore Orioles for the one wildcard spot that was available back at that time. So they didn't make the playoffs. They gambled that the Mariners had a very good team that season. It didn't quite work out, but you can understand why they did it. And certainly Hollins did everything they could possibly have hoped for, filling in for the injured Russ Davis. So you can understand why the Mariners were willing to make a trade. When you're in that pennant race, that's a common thing, right? But here's the interesting thing about the Twins. So Ortiz goes on then to actually play for the Twins, and he has a good year. In fact, in 2002, the year that Minnesota releases him, his stats are quite impressive. So in 2002, for the Twins, David Ortiz plays in 125 games, 412 at-bats, 32 doubles, 20 home runs, 75 RBI, 272 batting average, 339 on base, and 500 slugging for an OPS plus of 120, 20% above league average. So he's quite good as a designated hitter. And you think, why did the Twins release him? And there are actually a number of articles that are written about this when I started to look into it. But the main reasons that are given is that he had a series of injuries and was somewhat inconsistent. That doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. Another reason given is that the Twins did not want to go to arbitration with him. They were expecting him to make $1.5 million. And at that time, in 2002, they felt like that was too much for his skill set. They also felt that Matt LaCroix, who I'd have to look up to see even what Matt LaCroix did, would be an adequate replacement for him at DH. And apparently they were interested in making a Rule 5 claim, and they needed another roster spot. So in December of 2002, really inexplicably, the Twins released David Ortiz. 1 month later, he is signed as a free agent by the Boston Red Sox, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that's the story of how David Ortiz ended up with the Boston Red Sox. Next up, something to honk about. In this case, it's really about geeking out and some awesome super geek stats that I recently discovered. And as a baseball fan, you listeners may already know about this, but a recent discovery for me, Baseball Savant, an amazing website that really goes into incredible detail, a level of stats that you just don't find other places. And I discovered this when doing some research on the A's rookie, Skye Bolt. Some great information that you can find out at Baseball Savant are things that you might never think of, or things that you hear announcers talk about, these kind of stats, and you think, where did they get that? How did they find that out? So here's the kind of things you can learn. One of them, as I mentioned, Bolt is pretty quick. It lists his sprint speed at the 67th percentile. So that tells you that he's borderline great for speed. It also shows his maximum exit velocity. Well, he's only in the 31st percentile for exit velocity, which probably means he's not going to stack up as a great hitter, although he's certainly played very few games so far. But they have hitting stats, they have fielding stats. They will compare the stats from one year to the next. You can come in here and pick anything of interest. It even shows the distribution of defensive plays, like where balls land and the percentage chance of them being hits or being caught or being out, and where he typically plays in the outfield and where the balls hit against him land, and whether they land for hits or whether they are caught for out. So interesting to look up for defensive stats, and sometimes those can be a little harder to find. But even the batting stats are fascinating. They will have things in here to compare year over year. Let me take a look here. So just as an example, it'll show plotted, in this case, 2021 versus 2022, but it'll go back farther for players who have more StatCast history. But it compares their exit velocity from one year to the next, whether that's up or down. Skye Bolt's exit velocity is up 3% from a year ago to 89%. Still not very high. Launch angle is up by almost a percentage point, meaning he'd probably be more likely to hit a fly ball or home run. His barrel rate is actually up 5%, meaning he's making better contact. His hard hit rate is up nearly 13%. They have all kinds of things here that just remarkable. His strikeout percentage, now that's one you probably don't want to see go up, but it's up about 2% to roughly 27% this year. And his walk percentage, but that's also up, went from about 2% last year to 5% this year. It has his swinging percentage, his whiff percentage. That would be a swing and miss percentage. How much of the time does he swing at a pitch that's in the strike zone versus out of the strike zone? Actually, for Bolt, it's about even. It's 49% of the time this year that he swings at a pitch in the zone and 51% of the time that he swings at a pitch out of the zone. And also, how much of the time does he swing at a first pitch? And 27% of the time. Now, I don't actually know how these compare to league average, which would be interesting to look at. But these are just, to me, fascinating, super geek stats. And that's today what I have to honk about. So thank you, Baseball Savant, for that information. I'll be spending more time on this site in the future. Okay, next up is our blast from the past. Now, this week's blast from the past is a little bit different. It is not a baseball player. In fact, it is a person who never played a game in the major leagues. Our blast from the past today comes from the 1986 World Series, when a parachutist lands on the field in Game 6 in the first inning. Let me set the stage. Bob Ojeda is pitching for the Mets with Red Sox number 3 hitter Bill Buckner at the plate, when Michael Sergio, who according to Wikipedia was an actor, parachuted into Shea Stadium wearing a sign that said, "Go Mets." Of course, he was arrested and spent a short time in jail because he would not divulge the name of the pilot who flew him over the stadium in Queens that night. He landed on the infield just to the second base side of the mound and not far from Mets second baseman Wally Backman while Buckner was at the plate. Here's what Joe Garagiola said about the incident as an analyst on that evening's game. "That's about the only way to beat the traffic in this town." And pitcher Ron Darling, who was in the dugout as the security escorted Michael Sergio off the field, gives him a hand slap, a kind of low five, if you will, as the parachutist goes by. And any of you who are Mets fans or Red Sox fans, I'm sure, will remember that World Series well. And so that takes us to our Limerick, our baseball limerick that we have every episode. Today, our Limerick is a tribute to Michael Sergio, the parachutist in that famous 1986 game. On the mound, Bob Ojeda was dealing, while at second, Wally Backman had a strange feeling. Michael Sergio, he swooped down, landing safely on infield ground, while the fans found it all so appealing. So that's all for today, my friends. Join us next time because honestly, what can be better than talking baseball? Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Phil Estruth Harrison. We'll see you next time on My Week in Baseball.